18th century painting, Portrait of a Lady, was stolen by the Nazis nearly 85 years ago from Jacques Housteker, a Jewish art dealer in Amsterdam who was forced to flee the Netherlands when the Nazis seized his art collection. For decades, the painting was lost to the world, but in August of 2025, a Dutch journalist investigating its whereabouts spotted the painting on a real estate listing in the Argentine city of Mar del Plata, over 7,000 miles away from its original home. The listing belonged to the daughter of a high-ranking Nazi financier named Friedrich Kagen, who was associated with the painting when it was last seen in Switzerland nearly 80 years ago. When local authorities arrived at the house, the painting was replaced with a tapestry. After being subjected to several police raids, Patricia and her husband were placed under house arrest for the charge of aggravated concealment, and finally handed the painting over. Recovering the Portrait of a Lady isn't where this story ends. The story isn't even really about paintings. It's about the biggest organized art heist in history. The pieces of it are turning up today almost a century after they were stolen. This story is about the people who didn't just steal the art, but the institutional power that decided what deserved to exist and how culture is legitimized. But more importantly, this story is about the fight from those who sought justice, and how these individuals refused to follow the rules of that institution. These brave souls weren't armies or governments. They were people who looked at what the system was doing and decided to fight against it. So hello everybody, today we're going to be talking about the story of the big Nazi art heist. In this video, we'll see how a government can raid an entire culture with horrifying efficiency and how its opposition came from the unlikeliest of places. This is a story I've wanted to talk about for some time, and now I'm glad to finally be getting into it. I also want to say, if you head to the link in the description for a limited time at Wendigoon.shop, you can get in on the No Trace Club collection. This includes the No Trace t-shirt, hat, jacket, and of course, water bottle. A lot of the items have details I'm really proud of, like hidden Morse code across the articles of clothing, the ear flap hat that when you take the ear flaps down, you can see these scary eyes on the back, pace counter on the water bottle, and much more. Plus, a quarter of the proceeds are going to the National Forest Foundation, specifically their efforts to replant red spruce in southern Appalachia. So if you decide you like the merch, you're not only supporting me, but you're supporting putting trees back where they belong, and that certainly means a lot. So again, link in the description at Wendigoon.shop if you're interested. Get in on it while you can. So if all that sounds interesting to you, then stick around after the ad as we talk about a huge heist, the people that stopped it, and the pieces that we're still finding to this day. In these summer months, you're probably thinking about vacations, times with friends and family, and what you're not thinking about is spending your days in a hot kitchen. Normally, food on the go is either not good for you, or expensive. Thankfully, today's sponsor, Factor, is here to help. That's because Factor delivers chef-crafted, dietitian-approved meals straight to your door, so you can eat well this summer without spending all of your time in the kitchen. Factor meals are made with real ingredients, balanced macros, and at least 2 vegetables per meal. It's built to help you hit your nutrition goals during the summer months. And there's no planning, no prep, and virtually no cleanup. Their meals are ready to heat and eat in as little as 2 minutes. The problem with most microwavable meals is they don't taste good or they're bad for you. But where I used to be picky with Factor and only ordered the kinds of foods I'd like, now they can send me whatever they want. I'm always impressed with what they manage to put in a microwavable meal and make taste that good, without the guilt of eating a microwavable meal that normally follows eating a microwave meal. Plus, with their hundreds of options, I'm sure you'll find something you'll love. Like recently, they've launched new things like salads, elote corn, and between their snacks and breakfasts and juices, there's over 100 options each week, so I'm sure you'll find something you love. And there's a ton of add-ons like green juices and peanut butter energy bites. I mean, they've got you covered from sun up to sundown. 97% of people say Factor helps them live a healthier life, and 92% say it makes their life less stressful. And trust me, once you're on board, it's easy to see why. So if you're watching this and interested in getting in on Factor, then now's the perfect time. That's because if you scan the QR code or head to the link in the description at factor75.com, or click the link below and use code WendigangFB50, you'll get 50% off your first Factor box, plus free breakfast for a year. That's right, half off your first box and free breakfast for a year. Again, that's code WendigangFB50 at factor75.com to get in on their offer today. Offer only valid for new Factor customers with code and qualifying auto-renewing subscription purchase. Thank you to Factor for sponsoring the channel. Their link will be in the description, and we are now back to the video. We are going to go ahead and get into it, but as always, Thank you for watching. While the stealing of art might seem like a side effect of war, in Nazi Germany it was completely intentional, established as a focused state project. But even before the Nazis stole a single piece of art, they had first become the arbiters of what art deserved to exist in the new world that they were trying to create. During the first decades of the 20th century, Germany saw a flourish of new, radical art from contemporary artists such as Max Beckmann, Ernst Ludwig Kirchner, and Paul Klee, among others. Modern masterpieces were exhibited across progressive Weimar Republic state museums, introducing artists and their works to a massive international audience that included MoMA founding director Alfred H. Barr. And by MoMA, I mean the Museum of Modern Art in New York City. Like, the one. However, once Adolf Hitler was appointed Chancellor of Germany in 1933, Nazi agencies halted this era of German modernism. The government removed about 16,000 pieces from these state-owned museums and put them on mock exhibitions in cities like Dresden to publicly shame the creators, who were considered by many to be at the vanguard of modern art. In 1937, 740 pieces were exhibited in the infamous Degenerate Art Show in Munich. The goal was to educate the public on the art of decay. The Nazi Party wanted to demonstrate that modernism, like abstraction, was a result of inferior genetics and society's moral decline. Pieces in the Degenerate Art exhibition were hung crookedly on walls sprayed with graffiti that insulted the art and artists. The exhibition purposefully manufactured a sense of worthlessness surrounding the pieces, basically trying to gaslight the public into believing this particular form of expression was beneath a civilized society. Hitler preferred the realistic painting of buildings and landscapes that were looked down upon by the current art establishment. So it's very possible that the exhibition was a moment to enact his revenge on the artistic community. And although the Nazis claimed that degenerate art was from Jewish and Bolshevik artists, only 6 of the 112 painters and sculptors that were showcased were actually Jewish. Not only did the exhibition mock modern art, but it encouraged audiences to see the work as an evil plot against the German people. Curators even hired actors to interact with the crowds by criticizing the pieces. More than 1 million people visited the exhibition in Munich, 3 times more than the officially sanctioned Great German Art Exhibition that had originally displayed them. The people wanted to see what the new regime feared. The unintended side effect of the degenerate art movement was that these pieces had become highly attractive abroad, specifically in anti-Nazi circles, where the fact that they were opposed by the Nazis up their value. By this point, the propaganda machine was already up and running. Hitler's campaign to align everything with Nazi ideology, including culture, had began, and it had started with art. The brand of creativity that Hitler wanted in Germany was that which expressed the race-conscious arts of Nazi culture. Under this rule, individual geniuses made masterpieces because they were channeling and, more importantly, subordinate to the state. Obedience to the party was the one and only motivation. The first rounds of Nazi confiscation started officially in Austria in 1938, followed by Poland 1 year later. In Berlin, thousands of works that were deemed degenerate were set on fire. This triggered the alarm in art collecting circles around the world. Buy pieces now or lose them forever. It's also possible that the fires in Berlin had lit metaphorical fires of their own, a sense of resistance within individuals. Passionate art lovers became determined to ensure that the Nazis wouldn't have the final word on creative expression. The main organization put in charge of the confiscation was Einsatzstab, Reichsleiter, or ERR as they were commonly called, or as I'm going to call them, so you don't have to hear me try to pronounce that again. ERR operated from 1940 through 1944 and primarily looted art in Austria and Germany. The organization was initially founded by the Nazi theorist Alfred Rosenberg to study Jewish life and culture. Its mission was to collect archives, books, and other materials so Rosenberg's cohort of anti-Semitic scholars could examine them in an institution dedicated to anti-Jewish studies. The mandate from a scholarly study to a full-out art seizure changed in 1940 under orders from World War I veteran Hermann Göring. This is the moment where the decision about what is worthy and what exists becomes a matter of who gets to own anything. Germany's invasion of France in the summer of 1940 allowed the ERR to confiscate massive amounts of art from libraries, cultural institutions, and even high-profile galleries. Notably, the Rothschild family's collection was made a priority target. After the annexation of Austria, German troops headed to Vienna and stormed the Rothschild Palace, which they later turned into a Gestapo prison. While not a piece of art in the traditional sense, the fact that the Nazis used the Rothschild family's residence as a place to operate their interrogations bears resemblance to Hitler's intentions behind the degenerate art exhibit, a symbol of Jewish success, cultural significance, and wealth, rendered to a literal prison. What was once represented as a family's legitimacy was transformed into something used to strip that legitimacy from its prisoners. The Nazis confiscated over 3,500 art pieces from the Rothschilds, as their collection had been considered one of the greatest in the world at the time. As one of the most prominent, wealthy Jewish families, their pieces were used to fund the Nazi Party and supply Hitler's planned Führer Museum. In the span of a few months, written works and art were not the only pieces seized. Antiquities, such as furniture, carpets, and tapestries, were also confiscated and stored at the Jeu du Paume Museum in Paris as a centralized sorting site. Jeu du Paume, I'm so sorry. But as with most historical movements and organizations, the ERR had a face. That man was Bruno Loza. Appointed by Göring himself, Bruno was ruthless in his quest and presided over the theft of thousands of pieces of art and, quote, exploited the vulnerabilities of French Jews, forcing sales of artworks for mere pittances, if not resorting to outright theft. Bruno would later be acquitted by a military tribunal in 1950 and was never formally held accountable for his role in these thefts. After the tribunal, Bruno would actually work as an art dealer and even sought to retrieve the very paintings that he had confiscated. I just want everyone to know that Randall wrote after that, "From stealer to dealer," and then he left a note for all of you that says, "Go ahead, light me up in the comments for my puns. I will not apologize." Now, maybe when I send a SWAT team to your house, you'll feel differently, Randall. Hitler and the Nazis may have claimed the confiscation of art was intended solely to shape the culture, but many individuals within the party used this stolen art to enrich themselves. You know, the government saying that they're using money for public goods and then just using it to make themselves and their friends rich. Never heard of that one before. In 1939, Göring had around 200 pieces of stolen art in his own collection. By 1945, he had over 2,000, over half of which were paintings. From 1941 to 1942, Göring made nearly 20 visits to the Jeu du Paume, which by this point had become more warehouse than museum. Thousands of stolen works of art stacked against its walls, ready for shipment to Germany or Austria. What the Nazis didn't know was that, at the same time, someone inside the museum was discreetly taking it apart. Her name was Rose Valland, and she wasn't a soldier, and she wasn't a spy, at least not officially. She was the museum's very own curator, and for 4 years, she became the single largest threat to the entire operation. The Nazis wouldn't figure this out until after the war was over. Rose Valland, who oversaw the Jeu du Paume during this period, didn't just flee or resist the Nazis openly. She stayed behind at the museum to enact her plan, which, to the party, looked like a regular woman staying at her desk. Valland was a French art curator who kept her understanding of the German language hidden from the Nazis. She began making a secret record of the artworks brought to the museum and conversed with truck drivers contracted by the Germans to learn where the pieces were being seized and where they were being shipped. Over the course of 4 years, Valland provided information to the French resistance so that they would not mistakenly destroy trains that were loaded with France's most prized cultural artifacts. Rose Valland's heroism served as a testament to how much one person could accomplish with very little fanfare. Her private operation wasn't dramatic. She simply paid attention and documented what happened around her, relaying the information as necessary. After the war, Rose's contributions would directly lead the notorious Allied post-World War II art recovery team to the locations of various stolen holdings, aka the Monuments Men. In 1945, more than 6,500 paintings were discovered in the Alto Sebe salt mines of Austria by the Monuments, Fine Arts, and Archives Section Unit, commonly known as the Monuments Men. These men were tasked with protecting cultural treasures in European war zones. Just months earlier, the Monuments Men had discovered hundreds of caves and mines storing caches of art for the Nazis. Due to their stable humidity and relative dry conditions, these mines were ideal for storing paintings, which is why many of the pieces kept in the Altusee were intended to eventually be stored in Hitler's own Führer Museum in Linz. The deepest tunnels went over a mile into the mountain. But as the Allies closed in on Nazi strongholds in Austria, a regional Nazi leader named August Eigruber ordered his troops to destroy the mine and the artwork along with it. See, Hitler had instituted something known as the Nero Order. Basically, as the writing was on the wall that the Allies might win the war, he began to order that anything the Nazis had put together, from roads to bridges to factories, should be destroyed. That way, the Allies could not use them for their own benefit. This order would later be revoked, but for a time, it meant that the Nazis were destroying a lot of the things they built so that everyone else couldn't get in on it. I. Gruber was loyal to the National Socialist movement, so despite Hitler having walked back the Nero Order, and orders coming down from high up in the chain of command to not destroy the art, I. Gruber believed in the cause of the original mandate. In other words, if he can't have them, no one can. He disregarded orders and commanded that the bombing of the mine should commence. I. Gruber knew that local miners and the administrators overseeing the mine did not want to see such valuable resources destroyed. They secretly barricaded the portions of the mine that contained some of the rarest work. To circumvent tampering, I. Gruber had 8 crates with 8,500 kilogram bombs moved into the cave marked "Marble, do not drop," so that people trying to save the art would incidentally move the bombs closer to the art. But while he was waiting for demolition specialists to arrive to blow the bombs, the mine personnel discovered the true nature of these crates. The director of the mine convinced I. Gruber to place several smaller charges around the entrance to make the demolition more effective, then secretly had the larger bombs removed. When the demolition occurred, only the smaller charges went off, collapsing the mine's entrance and sealing the artwork inside. The Monuments Men later served as part of the effort to recover these pieces. You might recognize the name Monuments Men thanks to a 2014 film starring George Clooney and Matt Damon. But the real platoon were a crucial unit of dedicated art recovery specialists who operated outside the system and were established by the Allied forces to protect and recover key pieces in a war-ravaged Europe. The Monuments Men began operations in 1944 and were mostly comprised of young art professors and museum curators chosen for their knowledge in art history. President Franklin D. Roosevelt also established the Roberts Commission to aid in the recovery of art in Europe. The organization was created as America's response to the broader need for civilian groups emerging across Europe to protect the continent's cultural treasures. Recovery was partly possible due to ERR and the Nazi regime's thorough documentation of the things they stole. In addition to the mines, the Monuments Men had found a copper mine in Westphalia full of pieces by Rembrandt, Van Gogh, and Rubens. They also found an original score of Beethoven's Sixth Symphony among the paintings. In April of 1945, they came across the Merker salt mine, which housed millions of Reichsmarks in gold bars, non-monetary victims' gold, and more art from numerous German state museums. 4 notable art pieces saved by the Monuments Men include one, and probably most well-known, the Mona Lisa. In 1939, officials from the Louvre bundled what is considered the most famous painting in the world into an ambulance and evacuated it from the museum, along with 400,000 other pieces of art. The Mona Lisa moved around several times throughout the war to remain expertly hidden, including in various homes on the French countryside. The Monuments Men themselves assisted in transporting the painting to different locations at least 5 times before it was brought back to the Louvre in 1945. Number 2, and also an incredibly famous painting, Leonardo da Vinci's The Last Supper. It was saved from a bombing threat by the Allies in Milan in August of 1943. The mural set on the refectory wall of the convent at the esteemed Santa Maria della Grazia. In preparation for the airstrike, the Monuments Men rigged a scaffold of steel bars and sandbags over the wall. After the bombing raid, it was, quote, the only wall in the refectory still standing. 3 was the Ghent altarpiece. This was highly coveted by Hitler himself, who believed the massive 12-paneled arrangement of paintings hinged together was a symbol of Aryan supremacy. In the larger artistic community, the piece is revered for being a flashpoint marking the transition from the Middle Ages to the Renaissance and the first major oil painting. Nazi troops intercepted the piece as it was carried to the Vatican for safekeeping, and later stored it along with Hitler's other stolen art in the salt mines, where, as mentioned, it was later recovered by the Monuments Men after the war and then sent back to Ghent. And 4, Johannes Vermeer's The Astronomer. This was, as mentioned earlier, seized from a member of the Rothschilds in Paris by a Nazi task force that was the party's equivalent to the Monuments Men. A small swastika was stamped on the back of the painting in black ink, and the piece was sent to Hitler on one of his personal trains to be stashed in the salt mine. Out of the 300 members of the Monuments, Fine Arts, and Archives program, only a few dozen were women, and the most well-known was Rose Vallon. the museum director in Paris. Another member, Evelyn Tucker, was an MFAA administrator who was fired for her refusal to ignore the organization's biggest issue, the issue being looting from within and, subsequently, the program advising its members to turn a blind eye. Tucker, who was considered the most outspoken female voice in her field, kept detailed records regarding mismanagement by her superiors, and actively investigated American soldiers who looted the art recovered by the program. In November of 1945, the same year that the Monuments Men discovered the salt mines, the MFAA experienced a moral dilemma that would spiral into a massive scandal. The Wiesbaden Collection Center in Germany received a telegram that read, quote, "Immediate preparations be made for prompt shipment to the U.S. of a selection of at least 200 German works of art of great importance." The U.S. Army was seeking to confiscate hundreds of priceless, German-owned paintings as spoils of war. The MFAA had not been established solely to stop the Nazis from collecting and destroying the art. They were tasked with preventing similar accusations by any nation. So when the United States was trying to take art from Europe to America, they were in a dilemma because as Americans, they're, Americans, but as people who are trying to preserve the history of art, that doesn't fly. The members of the MFAA were faced with a difficult decision. If they didn't comply with the order, they would be court-martialed. And if they did, they would be facilitating the very thing they were tasked with stopping. 35 members of the MFAA protested against the shipment in a document known as the Wiesbaden Manifesto, calling the transport of the art, quote, "neither morally tenable nor trustworthy." They wrote that following these orders would make them, quote, "no less culpable than those whose prosecution we affect to sanction." However, wanting to protect the men who were putting their careers and freedom on the line, the section chief hid the document in his desk and never sent it to the army. The art, which included pieces by Diego Velázquez and Johannes Vermeer, was shipped to D.C. and displayed in the National Gallery of Art for over 3 years. In the January 1946 issue of College Art Journal, Monuments man Lieutenant Charles Kuhn published the manifesto, sparking a widespread debate regarding the ethics of the Army's decision to ship these pieces to the United States. And in 1949, all 200 pieces were returned to Germany. Many of the officers who risked their military careers in the manifesto went on to work in circles close to the art world. One officer opened an interior design firm in Cincinnati and wrote a memoir about the Monuments Men. Another became the director of several art institutions, including the National Gallery of Art in Washington, the Baltimore Museum of Art, and the Allen Memorial Art Museum at Oberlin College. However, not everyone who rallied against the machine of plunder saw a happy ending, and not everyone who operated it ever paid for it. While Rose Vallon and the salt miners acted mostly alone on instinct, what happened after the war became a totally different fight. Disrupting the Nazi Party's operation didn't automatically mean holding the system accountable afterward. Take Bruno, for example, who returned to a career as an art dealer despite being forbidden by the military tribunal per the conditions of his release. In fact, Bruno actually kept in contact with a former member of the Monuments Men, Theodore Rousseau, a controversial art curator at the Metropolitan Museum of Art who believed there was no reason for museums to exclude work looted by the Nazis. After he died in 2007, authorities discovered a secret bank vault in Zurich that Bruno controlled. The vault held several valuable paintings from Camille to Pissarro to Monet and Renoir. After an international investigation was conducted of Bruno's activities, European prosecutors seized documents that showed at least 14 pieces had been removed from his safe since the 1980s. Bruno faded quietly from history, his death receiving little fanfare. Bruno never truly paid the price for his crimes. You could even make the case that he was rewarded for everything he had done. I mean, considering that his time stealing art helped him as an art curator, and then connections he had made through the art theft, like his connection to Monuments Men, helped him be an even more successful art curator. What I'm saying is never expect justice out of anything and be sad all the time. But not everyone who is traded in Nazi-era relics has successfully escaped punishment. Following a police search in 2013, a simple tip regarding stolen art turned into a discovery no one expected: a tank. In the northern German city of Kiel, authorities executing a search for seized World War II related pieces were tipped off during a related investigation from Berlin earlier that year. Rather than art, police found a fully intact World War II Panther tank. Not in a yard or a warehouse, but in a cellar. You the kind that are underneath a house. The owner of the tank was a 78-year-old man who, according to local neighbors, didn't exactly keep the vehicle a secret. Residents had seen the man driving it around the town of Heikendorf 30 years prior. In the cellar, police also discovered a torpedo and an anti-aircraft gun, along with a, quote, variety of other military equipment. Locals watched as nearly 20 soldiers took nearly 9 hours to remove the tank, which was without its tracks, from the cellar. Oh, so like what? Boys can't have fun anymore? The war's over. The Nazis aren't going to come looking for it. I found a tank. It's mine. And if you disagree with me, well then guess what? I have a tank. And it's not like he was going to do anything with it. The locals saw him drive it like 30 years ago, and now it's just beneath his house. And the guns were decommissioned. It was just a big vehicle. It's like the equivalent of a really heavy tractor, a really inconvenient tractor, since it's, under your house. I mean, the guy found a tank and he hadn't hurt anyone with it for decades. Let him keep it. I'm mad over this. If I found a tank, for one, none of you would ever hear about it. And two, if anyone came for it, oh man, just you can imagine what would happen, which would be nothing, which means there's no reason to come looking because I definitely don't have a tank. So don't think about it. Like so many other pieces of art seized by the Nazis, there are masterpieces still lost. Not all of them were paintings or statues. The Amber Room, one such example, has sometimes been considered an eighth wonder of the world. The amber paneled chamber was decorated with gold leaves and mirrors in the Catherine Palace, located 20 miles south of St. Petersburg, Russia. During the war, the Nazis seized the panels, deconstructing them so they could reassemble the piece in Königsberg. However, because the Allied bombers were closing in, the panels were stored in crates until it was safe to reconstruct them. In August of 1944, Königsberg suffered an air raid, and then the paper trail ends. Often referred to as the room that vanished without a trace, many historians believe it was destroyed either in combat damage or the fires that followed the Soviet capture of Königsberg. An entire room that was held for years as a thing of beauty, completely gone. Other accounts suggest that the crates of panels were loaded on a ship that later sank and could be found at the bottom of the Baltic Sea, or as a more fringed theory suggests, that Stalin himself had a second amber room and the Germans had actually stolen a fake. If they stole a fake, then where did the real one go? If that's your argument, then there are now two missing amber rooms. One bizarre aspect of the amber room is that there is a curse supposedly attached to it. Remember how I did a video about Tommy Thompson, the guy that would do these deep sea treasure hunts? Well, a guy like Tommy Thompson would have been happy to not be searching for this piece. That's because people connected to it met untimely deaths. The curse can be traced back to Alfred Roda, a museum director who was appointed to dismantle the Amber Room in order for it to be created. But he and his wife had died of typhus. Later, a Russian intelligence officer died in a car crash right after he spoke to a journalist about the room. And probably the most gruesome case, a German soldier who searched for the Amber Room was found brutally murdered in the Bavarian forest in 1987. And now I, a YouTuber, have spoken of it. So we'll see what happens. Starting reconstruction in 1979, a new Amber Room was built. 25 years and $11 million later, it was finally finished, where it was dedicated by Russian President Vladimir Putin to mark the 300th anniversary of St. Petersburg. A couple other famous pieces of art that have yet to be found include Raphael's Portrait of a Young Man, which disappeared in 1945 when it was snatched by the Nazis in Poland. It's worth $100 million and is considered by historians as one of the most important paintings missing since World War II. The piece itself is thought to be a self-portrait and belonged to the Czartoryski Museum, one of Poland's oldest museums. The family patriarch, Józef Czartoryski, rescued the painting and hid it at a residence that was later discovered by the Gestapo under Hans Frank, Hitler's appointed governor of the general government. In 1945, Frank brought the piece to Krakow for his personal use at the Wawel Royal Castle, where it was last seen. Despite numerous efforts from the Czartoryski family, the original empty frame of the painting currently hangs in the National Museum of Krakow, and Vincent van Gogh's The Painter on the Road to Tarascon. It was kept in the Kaiser Frederick Museum until it was either destroyed during the Allied bombings or looting towards the end of the war. The piece is currently listed as missing on the Monuments Men website. Think about it this way. Pieces like Leonardo da Vinci's The Last Supper or his Mona Lisa. Imagine if, since the 1940s, they were just gone. Similar to Van Gogh's painting, similar to the Raphael painting. What if they just disappeared and the only thing we had of them were rumors and whispers? If we had the painter on the road to Tarascon, would that be as famous as, say, his Starry Night? It's weird to think with some of these things how much cultures are shaped by just seemingly the happenstance of what happened. I mean, sure, there were people who made efforts to save and retrieve these works of art, but what if they had found one and not the other? How much of that would have changed our history as we know it? In addition to the hundreds of thousands of paintings that haven't been recovered, millions of books, manuscripts, and other cultural artifacts still remain unaccounted for, but efforts have been and are still being made to find anything we can. The 1998 Washington Conference, which 44 countries participated in, endorsed the principles of Nazi confiscated art, a standard for resolving issues related to looted pieces. The principles include the idea that all seized art should be identified, archives should be opened, claimants should be assisted, and pre-war owners and their heirs should be pursued when possible. In the United States, museums have improved their professional practices. In the same year as the original Washington Conference, the American Association of Museums recommended that these institutions make all available information about certain pieces accessible online for public research. Under these guidelines, museums should identify any art in their collections that could have possibly changed hands during the Nazi era. As for specific museums taking action themselves, the Met began its Provenance Research Project in 2000. Quote, to determine whether any works of art in the museum's collection could have been unlawfully appropriated in the Nazi era and not subsequently restituted to their rightful owners. And in 2016, the HERE Act was passed to provide victims of Nazi persecution, including their heirs, the opportunity to recover artworks that were confiscated or misappropriated by the Nazis. One of the HERE Act's main goals was to enable Holocaust survivors and their heirs to access U.S. courts and have their claims decided on facts. For this act, most claims were dismissed on technicalities. As for the Monuments Men Foundation, today it acts as a public most wanted art list. Anyone can access it and actively aid the search for these stolen works of art. Sadly, not every piece will be recovered, and perhaps very few will at this point. But like with the story I mentioned at the beginning of this video, as recently as 2025, some still may. There's something admirable about the fact that the original mission these men and women started over 80 years ago still lives on today. As memories of the last Great War fade and the people who lived through it pass on, so do the last vestiges of some of the greatest works of art humankind has ever created. It's wild to imagine a world in which Hitler and the Nazis had actually been victorious if they had it their way. The ultimate creative expression of what it means to be human would likely have been one of its many casualties. Thankfully, that's not the reality we currently live in, unless of course you're watching this video from that reality somehow, in which case, sucks for you. It's also interesting how much can be lost through art. I mean, obviously so many of our cultural histories and history itself is determined by experiences humanity has and what we do with those experiences and the things we create in the sake of it. So to imagine that a lot of it could just disappear and sometimes we may never get it back is scary. What's beautiful about art is that it continues to thrive. Even in the midst of turmoil, something still comes out of it. Art still comes out of the death of itself. So it's very cool that all these people in World War II, made all these efforts to save art, and then after the war to put art, back where it belongs. It's all really cool. I can't help but at the end of this video, just bring up the fact that we are now trying to willingly have a collective death of art by using stupid AI machines to just throw up on computers again and again and pretend like it's for some reason in the same qualification as art, and it's all stupid and I hate it here. What was I talking about? Anyway, that should do it for the story of the Nazi art theft. I've wanted to talk about this story for some time. Ever since I watched the Monuments Men movie, I've been interested in the true story around them. And I think it's fascinating not only what they did then and what several unsung heroes around that time did for art as a whole, but that from then till now, the fight's still going on. So I'm happy to highlight that story, and I certainly found it interesting, and hopefully you did as well. And we just want to say, thank you for watching. I apologize for the uploads being so late on this channel as of late. I've been traveling a ton over the summer, so typically I get home and record and then push the editor through a very mean turnaround time, which I normally tell him, it's mostly Lucy, mostly you, Lucy. I try to tell Lucy that, you know, no rush, get it back when you can, and then they'll spin it around in like 24 hours, which is absurd, and I don't want you to do that to yourself. But I appreciate it. But yeah, trying to keep weekly uploads going with a lot of the travel, it's been difficult. Sorry that the pace has been wrong, but hey, hypothetically, subscribe here for uploads Mondays at noon, sometimes. Videos occasionally over on Wendigoon. I have a very large video that either went up the day before or the day after this video went up, depending on which gets done first. So it's not up yet, be ready for that. And if it is up, check that out. Videos on when to glitch whenever I, decide to play a video game again. That would be nice. And again, if you want to support me and the trees, head to the link in the description at wendigoon.shop to get in on the No Trace Club collection while you can. All in all, I believe that should do it for now. But before I go, we just want to say thank you for watching. We hope that you enjoyed, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye! I'm still mad about the tank thing. Like, who does the German government think they are? The guy has a tank and he's not going to blow anything up with it because the gun doesn't work on it anymore. And even if he was going to blow something up with it, well, guess what? He's had it for decades. He could have done that. They should have given the tank to me. I'm going to find a tank. I'm going to bury it somewhere, and not a soul is going to know about it. When my wife asks what I'm doing, I'm going to make up something less embarrassing, like I'm having an affair or whatever. Because who is she? Who is she to think that she gets to know about my tank? I don't want the German government knowing about my tank. They may do what they did to this guy. No one gets to know about my tank. It's mine.